This is how to loom knit gloves using a round loom, and we're going to be using a 29 peg loom, and we're only going to be using one strand of yarn. This is what the glove looks like, and when you put it on, this is what you're seeing. You're going to see seams in between the fingers like this, all the way down, but not on the pinky and first finger. You're also going to see seams that are down the thumbs, and you're going to see a gathered area and a seam at the wrist. Again, we're going to be using a 29 peg loom, and while it may seem like you should use a 24 peg loom, if you do, the fingers are too small. So we're going to use a single strand of yarn, and I'm using a 4-ply. And what you want to do is we're going to start from the fingertips and work down to the wrist. So I kind of messed up on the first one. You'll need to cast on 9, not 8. If you accidentally cast on 8, it does work. It just makes the first finger a little bit more snug than you'd like. But make sure you draw a string cast on 9. And we're starting with the first finger. And now you want to knit 9 pegs for 15 rows. At this point, go ahead and pause the video to complete your 15 total rows. Now that you've done that, this is generally what it should look like. And what we're going to do is we're going to move the last loop over to the next previous peg like a decrease, but we're not going to decrease. And we're going to do that on both sides. And what this allows, after you do that, you want to draw a string cast on 5 pegs. And the reason why we do this is we're wanting more width on the fingers. And this allows us to have an extra 2 pegs per finger without having to use an even bigger loom. So go ahead and knit 5 pegs for a total of 21 rows, and this is your middle finger. This is half of the middle finger. But moving those pegs over allows us to have a wider finger area without having to use a bigger loom. Go ahead and pause the video and complete your total 21 rows. After you've done that, you'll see that it's connected from the base of one finger to the tip of the other. This is okay. We're going to snip it in half after we finish knitting the whole glove. So go ahead and move that loop back over to where it originally was. And then you're going to take the other end and move that loop over like a decrease, but that you just did previously. And now you want to draw a string cast on 5 pegs like you just did with the middle finger. This is going to be the ring finger. And you want to knit 5 pegs for a total of 17 rows. Alright, go ahead and pause the video to complete your 17 total rows. And you'll see that it's connected. So go ahead and repeat what we just previously did. Move that loop back over to the original peg it was on. Then take the end peg and move that to the previous peg. Now you want to draw string cast on 8 pegs, and we're doing the pinky, and the pinky is all in one, like the first finger is. And you want to knit 8 pegs for 15 rows. And at this point, go ahead and pause the video to complete those rows, as well as going about completing your ring and index finger on your other half. So after you complete your pinky and you move those loops over a peg, you want to repeat what you did with the ring finger. So next 5 pegs, 17, and then the next 5 pegs, 21 rows. And here's what it should look like when it's done. So there's your fingers, and what you want to do now is go ahead and we're going to attach all the fingers together and start working on the part that's between the fingers and the thumb. So now you want to knit 29 pegs for 15 rows. So go ahead and pause the video to complete your 15 total rows. This is what it should look like. Now we want to do our thumb area, and we want to get it in the middle of the index finger. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit 2. Then you're going to work the next 5 pegs only, back and forth. And what you want to do is you want to knit 5 pegs, 30 rows total. And what you're doing is a fold over, which is the reason why it's 30 rows. So go back and forth on those 5 pegs for a total of 30 rows. Okay, go ahead and pause your video to complete your thumb area. After that's done, if you're wanting to do a half-fingered glove, you want to stop in the middle and move the very middle peg over 1, like you do in the half-finger glove video on the straight looms. You do the same thing on the thumb. When you get to however many rows I do, you do the same thing. If you watch that video, however many rows I do the same thing. So that's kind of a guide on how to do the half finger gloves. Now that you've completed your thumb area, you want to knit 22 pegs back to your start point. Okay, at this point you want to work circularly still, and you want to knit 29 pegs for 7 total rows. And this is working our way to the wrist. So go ahead and pause the video and complete your rows. Now that we've done that, we're going to want to work on starting to decrease so that it fits snugly around the wrist. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit 20 pegs to start. And this should put us in the middle of the pinky area on the other side of the hand. At this point, we're going to stop and we're going to start working flat. And as you can see, we're right in the middle of the pinky area. So go ahead and decrease 1 peg. And if you're working with 30, go ahead and decrease by 2 if you're working with a 30 peg loom rather than a 29 peg. and then knit 28 pegs. So from here on out we're working flat. So go ahead and knit 28 pegs. Now if you were doing this on a, say, 30 peg loom, you'd just add the extra peg to the pinky, and you would go throughout the same process. And at this point, instead of decreasing by 1, you would decrease by 2 instead. Okay, at this point, we're working our way down to 22 pegs. So go ahead and decrease by 1 on each end. And now you're going to see 3 empty pegs, and if you're working with 30, it should be 4. So go ahead and knit 26. Now decrease again on each end, and then you're going to knit 24. And you should see 5 empty pegs. 6 if you're working with 30. And go ahead and decrease by 1 on each end again, and this will be our last decrease. So now you should have a total of 7 pegs empty, or 8 if you're working with 30. Go ahead and knit 22. After this row, we'll be exactly at the wristband, and we'll be changing up what we're doing. Okay, now that that's done, we're doing the actual wrist area, and you'll see it's ribbed, and it's because we're going to do a knit purl all the way around to create that area. So you're going to knit 1, purl 1 all the way around. So this one's knit and purl, and knit and purl, and continue this all the way around, knit and purl, knit and purl. Okay, once you get to this side, then you're going to purl 1, knit 1 all the way around. And your goal is to keep and make sure that your purls line up and your knits line up so you can keep that nice ridging going. So knit, purl, knit all the way around on this row, and you want to keep doing this for a total of 10 rows. So keep the knit 1, purl 1, and then purl 1, knit 1 all the way around for a total of 10 rows. So go ahead and pause the video to complete your wrist area. After that's done, we're going to very loosely cast off because we want to be able to get our hand in the glove. So you want to very loosely cast this off, which means I'm putting the loop on there, I'm barely wrapping it, I'm lightly pulling it through. So you want to take this really nice and easy and loose, and try not to do this tightly at all. You want to do this all the way around. Okay. Then you want to snip a very long end so that you can use this end to sew up your wrist area. And you can see that the glove kind of looks a little funky at this point. But the sewing up part is going to be very important. And that's what makes it look really nice, is if you sew it up really neat and tidy, it looks like a really nice glove. So what we want to do is we want to cut those strands that connected our base of our fingers, or the tips, in half. And we're going to use these to tie the tips together and the bases of the fingers together, so that we make sure that our fingers are lined up, so that we don't get to sewing our fingers together and then suddenly we have them off on where they're being sewn. So this kind of helps us keep everything in guide and together. So yeah, go around and cut all those strands in half so that you can use them to get everything lined up. Okay, at this point I'm going to show you generally what we're trying to do, and you see your first and your pinky finger curl around, and that your halves need to be sewn together on your middle and ring. So what you want to do is you want to find the strings that are across from each other at the base, like that. But first you want to turn the glove inside out, because you want all this work to be on the inside and you don't want it showing at all on the outside. So what you want to do is you want to start finding those strands and you want to start tying them together. So there's your pinky finger, and you want to line up the fingers and make sure that they line up, and you want to tie the base together. So there's your two strings that you can tie the base together. So go ahead and do 2 half knots, and then you want to come up to the very tip and you want to do 2 half knots. And because they're drawstrung together, it doesn't matter that they're across from each other. Okay, then you want to go to the base of the fingers again, and you want to tie those ends together. And go to the tip and tie those ends together. And on the first finger, you'll want to go in, and you might need your crochet hook for this, and take, because there's just one strand, and you want to take it directly across and pull the yarn through. And I typically wrap it again and pull it through to knot it. As I said, this is just a guide to make sure that the fingers are lining up correctly, so that when you go to sew them together, you don't have anything wonky happen. Okay, so you can see that you generally have your fingers set up. So now we're ready to sew the fingers up. And when sewing your fingers up, it's going to be very important to find your very edges and sew them together, because if you sew too close in, you start losing the width of your fingers being able to fit in there. So I'm going to start at the pinky. You can start at the first finger. I'm choosing to start at the pinky. And I'm going to use the strand that's there to tie it off, and that drawstrings the pinky tip together. Now at this point, there's what I call a ridged area and a straight area in between, and you'll see them, and you want to kind of line those up. There's your ridge area and there's your straight areas, and I like to send the needle through the straight areas. And when you line those up, it also, when you send them through the straight areas, it keeps the stitching even, which looks nice and neat. So go ahead, and you want to find those very tip areas so that you don't lose any of the width for your fingers to be able to go into those. And when you get to the base of the fingers, it can be a little tricky. But what I like to do is pull the sewn strand tight and then pull the fingers so that it's a nice strong seam, but not too tight. So go ahead and start trying to line that very, very end area up where you see the straight area with the ridges, and sew into those straight areas all the way around. And you can start to see that it's flattening out and starting to look more and more like a glove. So go ahead and pause the video and finish sewing up all the way around your fingers, all the way to the first finger. Now that that's done, I like to go ahead and trim those extra strands off on the inside so that you don't have bulky areas when you put the glove on. I managed to misplace my scissors, which is the reason why I'm using a X-Acto knife to cut my strands. I know that may seem a little odd. Okay, so your fingers are completed. Now I'm going to do the wrist before I do my thumbs, and you'll see why here. So this thing I'm doing here is because I have attaching pieces of yarn, so I kind of was cutting the excess off, and you'll see me struggle with it. Okay, so go ahead and make sure you find your ends again, your very ends, and you want to start sewing them up around the wristband area. And once you get the wristband area sewn up, you're going to stop there and not continue. At that point, we're going to do a gather, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to weave the needle in and out of those very tip areas, like that. You're just going to weave it in and out. Because this is going to be a gathered area, so it doesn't have to be exact. And then once you have the weave in and out done, then you want to pull the strand to make it tight, and it should gather that in. But make sure that it doesn't tighten around the wristband area. After you get done doing that, go ahead and tie your end off. And at this point, the glove should fit snugly around the wrist area. Okay, at this point we're going to sew up our thumb. And this is going to seem strange, but I'll show you why. You want to go ahead and put the glove on your hand, because the problem is just sewing it straight up, you can get almost a open space showing. So I find it's easiest to put the glove on at the base of the thumb to make sure that it gets sewn up nice and tight. Okay. So now that I've got it generally placed, I go one back from the end, as you can see. And I tend to do that all the way around. One back from the end, one back from the end, and then you're going to gather it together. At this point you can take the glove off and tie it off. You'll do this at the beginning of the thumb and the end of the thumb. And now you want to start lining those straight areas up and sewing those down. Again, make sure you find your edges because you don't want to lose the width in your fingers. And I usually just lightly send the needle through so I don't have to cut and restart again. Okay, at this point you want to go ahead and put the glove back on. And then follow one back from the end all the way around like you did in the beginning. And this can be a challenge. So one back from the outer edge, one back from the outer edge, one back from the outer edge, and one back from the outer edge. Draw a string it together. If you see any open areas, go ahead and close them up, and then tie off your end. And at this point, you're done. Flip the gloves right side out and then make two of them, and that's it. You're done. I find this goes actually faster than doing it on the straight looms with the actual clips. And they still look good. There's just more sewing involved. So there you go. Flip the glove right side out. Okay, and there you go. You're done.